All right. Well, welcome to Next Generation Validation and Quality Experts today. This is the first in a series of new webinars that we're going to do this year. So I'm really happy to bring to you 4 folks that are going to share their validation journey with us today. We're going to talk about some future trends in validation and technology that they're seeing, and also kind of help me understand what I need to do better as a Generation X in the work field today. All right, so we're going to start off with Skylar. Skylar, why don't you tell us about your validation story and how you are doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Skylar Deneen. I work for CAI. I started in October 2020, so about 2 years and a little bit. I'm a validation engineer and a project manager. So a lot of the work that I've done with my company has been supporting clients, expanding manufacturing spaces, expanding lab spaces with their analytical equipment, performing all the regulatory testing that's associated with it for CSV. And then about a year and a half ago, I started getting into project managing, which has been quite a shift in terms of the skill set required and a lot more administrative, I'd say. But it's nice to kind of change things up, do something new. Prior to working with CAI, I was in college. This is actually my first career job. So I went to the University of Virginia, graduated in May 2020 with a degree in chemical engineering. And I kind of found myself to CAI just through, I was looking for a job and I knew, okay, chemical engineering, pharma, oil and gas, ceramics, coatings, things like that. Found CAI through the pharma track. And then I didn't even know that the stuff that I'm doing now existed. I had no idea that this whole, computer system validation side of pharma was a thing. So it was quite, a learning curve jumping into it. My very first project was supporting a client's COVID vaccine. So it was very, very, drinking through a fire hose. Had to learn how to do things quickly and start contributing quickly. It was a good way to learn initially, just to kind of get the base of it. But then from there, I kind of learned, there's a lot more into this that we usually do when it's not just for EUA. So I've been continually learning. Even now, I'm still learning new things that I haven't seen before within the industry.
That's so interesting, is that your first, and this is what it was, right? And so what are some of the things or characteristics that you thought were good, maybe as a student, that applied to what you're doing today? Is there anything? Or is it all new?
Most of it's very new. There's not very much I took from the curriculum, from college to today. A lot of it is honestly the problem solving. It sounds kind of cliche, and I feel like everybody kind of goes to that, but working through, okay, I have this requirement. How am I going to test it? Let me go explore the software and try to figure it out. There's really no clear set of directions a lot of the time, and being able to use that critical thinking that I was, taught and kind of I was able to hone it in college is definitely helping out a lot now.
Yeah, but none of those chemical engineering skills, right? All that physical chemistry, flow dynamics, not really coming into play, nor is that calculus, let me tell you.
No.
All right. Great.
When I'm in the space, I see like the pipings and everything, and I'm like, oh, I could map out a P&ID, but that's not my job today.
Right. Could be maybe in your future, but not today.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Let's move on. Binny, would you like to share your story?
So yeah, again, my name is Bin Lee. I go by Binny, and I am currently with CAI. And before this, I was actually in quite a few GXP industries before I jumped into validation. After I graduated, I was a QA/QC for food companies, seafood companies, salad company, and then I realized every food industry I go into, I kind of stopped eating their food for a little while before I'm like, okay, I'm starting, I need to eat again. And then after that, just kind of roam around to see what else is in the market besides QA/QC for food, I then went into environmental laboratory, and I was the analyst there for 3 years. And I realized the lab in me, it's not really for me. I really enjoy like the equipment portion, but repeating the same thing every single day was not for me. And I was fortunate enough to meet one of my coworkers' husband, and was like, "Hey, maybe you want to look into validations." I was like, "What is that?" And I applied to the company he worked for, got accepted, and that's how I started on my validation career. I started as a validation technician, soon stayed there for like 2 years, advanced to promoted to validation engineer over in my former company. It's not exactly a small company, but it's compared to like Thermo Fisher's, Gilead, and all that. It's fairly sized. So basically, in the validation department, we do everything. We do cleaning, we do shipping validation, we do like all sorts of validation and testing. So I got to learn quite a bit, and then I figured that I really wanted to learn more, because I noticed that being in one company, you only get to learn that one company's culture, especially as like a direct hire company. So I figure if I were to join a consulting company, I get to jump around to different companies and learn their culture and see how their way of doing things. And when I heard about CAI and they told us that, well, we do extensive training, we will send you off for training too, I was like, yes, sign me up. So that's how I got here too.
Yeah.
And fun fact is, one of my very first projects with CAI, I actually got to work with Himadri. So yeah.
That's great. So Benny, what did you get your degree in? Did I miss that?
Yes, so I went to Cal Poly Pomona. I graduated with biotechnology and chemistry.
Okay, so another chemist. So I'm seeing Trent. I'm a chemist too. So we have 2 chemists so far. Let's see what else we have here. Himadri, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Himadri Doma. I initially started off my journey as a software programmer, or in other words, call it as firmware programmer. Um, I had my bachelor's in electrical and that's called electronics and communication engineering, which is equivalent to telecommunication engineering in United States. I have my bachelor's from India. So I was working with a company who makes small parts and firmware for lab instruments. That was my internship, and turned it into a full time right when before I was graduating from college. Um, and they were a kind of third party company. They make small parts for lab instruments and medical devices for like almost all pharma, life sciences. It's like a supporting company. So I was a electronics and communication engineer. I do have experience in coding, so I got hired by them as an intern. So I was a good programmer who knows a lot of hardware languages. So I was writing codes for a lot of lab instruments, which I don't know what lab instruments do, but I only know how code works and how to write the code. So then I had that big interest in embedded systems and chips. So where I had to move to United States for doing my master's. I have my master's in electrical and computer engineering. So where I had to do computer architecture and a lot of computer networking things. Then I slowly, when I was graduating, so I had to pique the interest from my past job where I had to do some coding and firmware coding for some lab instruments. So I took a course about this, how this works, and there there I found this validation, how you validate instruments and how you validate computer systems. So there I had to take a course like um, one of a trainer like you, so
Mm-hmm.
who I had to pick, and then I had to pay for it. So I learned by having CSV training and regular validation training for instruments, and then right after that I got a job as an entry-level CSV engineer in a big company. It's a contractor position
Mm.
for their lab system. So they have this Empower and a lot of other lab
Mhm.
systems that they want someone to validate. They have already validation engineers, but they want someone to write the documentation and kind of a help for them. So that's where I started as a CSV engineer. Um, and I moved on to, like, after that contract, I moved on to another big company by looking at my background. So they kind of want similar background, and I moved on to another company called Allergan Activist. Then there I had to work on different CSV projects where they had acquisition with different companies. And yeah, so after that, I had to move on to medical device company.
Mhm.
So, because I have electrical and computer engineering background, they want someone who knows about firmware and who understands about medical device firmware and software. So they hired me for that. They have a remediation project that's going on. So I had to work on, as a contractor, you had to put your hands on different projects. So I had to work on medical devices and the software that's used in medical devices. So I took it as a challenge, and I learned a lot in medical devices. And I was supporting medical device validation, like from the software point of view. And right after that, I got an opportunity with a startup. So I started as a contractor, and they hired me as a full time. Where my whole validation journey, I had to wear a lot of different hats. So I experimented being a project engineer, equipment engineer, automation engineer, and maintenance engineer. Like, learned a lot. In startup, there's no limit.
Right.
You can just go and work on anything. So um, and these are all like part of my journey. And then I was a part-time PM in the same company. And then after experimenting all, I decided to stick to my strength, CSV.
Mhm.
I believe in collective strength to the team. Then I stick on to my expertise, where computer system validation is to help everyone on the team to empathize, like, how it works, because it's a startup company. They don't have anyone who has knowledge in computer system or automation systems. So kind of I have that background with other big companies, and I have that background in my master's and bachelor's. So I transformed into a validation engineer, computer system validation engineer. So where I
Okay.
had to work with that startup company for 4 straight years. And I was working on a lot of packaging
Mm.
machines where it has automation inbuilt into it. So
Yep.
I was kind of lead for those. And I've had a lot of learning in a
I'm
startup
hearing a
company.
trend, right? Like I'm
Yeah,
hearing a trend in all three of you so far. I'm curious to hear Sam soon, but having
sure.
to get into lots of different things and having to figure it out, right? So that is very similar. And so even in my journey, that is the same thing. So, and that's 25 years ago. So it's amazing to me in some ways that the same process that you guys have had to go through very recently is still the same, right? There's still this hands-on experience that we've all had to get into and jump into to do and learn.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and after all, experimenting computer system validation, and then now I'm a validation engineer turned into a QA CSV engineer. So now I'm into quality realm,
Mm-hmm.
where I had a particular interest in quality assurance, and
Mm-hmm.
to learn the principles of quality, and to learn the different perception of quality than the validation.
Yep.
So now I'm a Tomer working as a quality validation for the past 2 years. So I'm I'm motivated to make CSV and CSA um, great to non-expert users,
Mm-hmm.
where by using my presentations, by using my training
Yeah.
methodology. So I like to teach and coach.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
yeah,
great.
this is what my whole journey
Yeah.
in validation.
Nice. That's wonderful. Thanks,
Thank you.
Hamadri. All right, Sam. wrap us up. Tell us, so we have two chemists or chemical engineer chemists, and we have one computer systems. What
Electrical
electrical?
and computer engineer.
Okay. All right, Sam.
Well,
Tiebreaker?
so first one, then the other, actually. I went to school for chemistry initially, medicinal chemistry, and I got my start in the QC lab at Alere, just, swinging a pipette 12 hours a day, doing a lot of testing, doing some statistical analysis, and helping out in the QA department. And I spent about 3 years after that in a production chemistry lab as well. But I got my break into CSV and into this world at Genentech on a big project. They were doing a large manufacturing build out in the Oceanside facility. I had a connection into the automation department where they were just looking for any warm body who could do documentation, just reading code, understanding how the systems work and were put together, making sure everything was documented, and assisting the validation team in preparing for testing. So I got to jump in there and just get a lot of time hands-on, learning the automation systems, learning the way the quality system was set up to accommodate the processes, understanding the software development lifecycle and system development lifecycle. And I really just loved it, took to it really quickly, got to see the intersection of tech and chemistry and pharmaceutical manufacturing, and decided to go back to school, pursued a degree in computer science while I was working full time. So I got both. I don't know if that's a tiebreaker or not, but
I don't know. It's
yeah,
interesting though. That's great.
yeah. So just really took to it, tried to apply theoretical knowledge wherever I could in practice. Got to work on building management system rollout, a brand new deployment, new hardware from scratch over there. I got to implement some pretty large scale automation projects with the oversight of engineers, where I was essentially modifying every software object that was in use at the plant. So I, just thought that was really cool. And I wanted to kind of branch out of the industrial control system side and see what IT looked like, just corporate IT with that regulatory touch. So I went to my current company at the time, Project Outlier, and got assigned to a client in the Bay working in their R&D department. And that was really interesting and eye-opening to see, stepping out of the physical realm and into the cloud, how all these systems support clinical trials worldwide, how we're supporting laboratories and research departments. The statistical programming side of it all was really interesting, and just bolstering that with theory at the same time. I felt like everything worked hand in hand. Everything that I learned, I was able to apply on a daily basis, right? And I think my passion for it really budded there. Ways that we can take modern technology and apply it to making our jobs easier. Just the gears started turning, seeing the different modalities, different applications of computer systems. So I spent another year after that at a startup where we were working on some of the similar problems, working on test automation, working on agile development and agile CSV to work in hand with that, and compliant infrastructure in the cloud, which I feel has been ignored by a lot of companies. They just assume the cloud is compliant, and they forge right ahead into it without doing the same diligence that they do when they have on-premise systems.
Yeah.
And most
Let
recently,
me just make a note
yeah.
of that, because I want to get to, that's a great topic to talk about later, but that is very interesting. Yes, you were spot on. Mm-hmm.
And most recently, I returned to Project Outlier after leaving that startup to build a team out, both within our consultancy of CSV engineers. They didn't really have a practice. I was essentially hire number one when I was there the first time, and hire number one again the second time, and building out that client team at building out that team at our client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a couple of themes I'm hearing from all of you too, right? Consultants, right? So you guys have kind of jumped in early in your career and of getting the added benefit of being a consultant and exposure to all these different scenarios that really has helped filled up your cup with experience pretty rapidly. What do you guys think of each other's backgrounds? Do you have some thoughts?
So I'm curious for Himadri, how you liked leaving so much software engineering behind and coming into computer system validation engineering. Do you miss it? Because I feel like I'd like to shift and pivot into a role where I'm a lot more code-based, heads down time.
Actually, I don't know if I want to share. I don't know if I can share that story. Initially, I wanted to become a doctor. Like when I was a kid,
Me
I wanted to
too.
become a doctor because my father is a doctor. So, um, kind of like I didn't know that I'm gonna come into this medical field or life sciences field or
Mm,
pharma field. So I love being a doctor, but I don't regret being where I am now. But um, somehow I got into the same field, so I like what I'm doing, and I like where I am, and I like working for the pharma and life sciences. I don't miss the software engineering because still I'm in the same realm. I'm doing the same thing, and I do work with. I have worked with IT teams, and I do work with IT teams. I mean, currently I'm in quality, but that doesn't mean that I only do quality. But
mhm,
when IT engineers build their system, they do ask my opinion on it,
mhm.
even though I'm in quality, so I do know the principles of IT and validation. So it's a kind of a big advantage that
It's a
I've
nice
had.
hybrid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So so in that way, I'm still in the software engineering group, but
Right.
Yeah.
I don't
With
miss
a
it.
different hat, with a different
Yeah,
hat. And one
with a
of the,
different hat.
right. And so what's really interesting, Sam, is so to have those multiple backgrounds, right? To be able to, what I often talk about is come to the table, right? Be able to, like, we need all of us, regardless of what we're doing, right? We need pieces of information enough to know when we need more help at the table, right? So given that you have some hybrid backgrounds, right, you're able to, well, you hear something and you say, oh, wait a minute, we need to bring more IT people in, or we might need to bring more quality people in, or more regulatory people in, right? You knowing enough of the lingo, right? Knowing enough to be dangerous, right? I like to call it, right? But also aware that, hey, this might be more than that, right? I think is a really interesting skill set that not necessarily everyone has because they've gone into and they've only done this, right? And so what I experience is a lot of consultants, young consultants, that's actually getting to into that experience, get a much more bigger breadth of understanding versus someone that just goes to a big named company because they only understand that perspective, similar to what Benny was saying earlier. Yeah.
So I can concur with that. So having me being in a QA, QC lab, food, environment, all these type of industries, I noticed that when I was doing my project, not only in my former company, but even in my current company with some clients, I noticed that, hey, this looks so familiar. I know exactly what to do, or I think I can apply that type of skill to this. One of the things that I have always been doing is, which I recently learned, it's called first principles, is that I basically learn certain things or understand certain things to the root to know like what are some of the fundamental building blocks, and then from there to resolve like more complex problems. So wearing multiple hats before, including like PMs, including all sorts of roles, actually helps you very, very far.
Other thoughts?
So I just want to
Yeah,
ditto what Benny said. I've heard it as gestalt learning, where nothing particular makes sense until you understand the whole picture, right?
Mhm.
Like you can go through the motions of any one particular task, but once you like get hands-on with everything, it just makes a lot more sense. Everything clicks. You can understand what other people are doing and the value that provides and the role that it serves.
I totally agree with you, Sam, because now I can feel that like being in different departments or being worked as or hands-on experience with other departments, I know how and what they feel exactly when they're going through this transformation or when they're going through this whole validation life cycle. So validation wants this to be done, but maintenance or but project engineering, why is this needed?
Yeah.
Or why is this needed? Are lab people, why is this needed? So I totally understand why they they think that it is not needed, why validation thinks it's needed. So being that um, you know when you have experience having in different roles, you can kind of like understand where they're coming from, and you can clear off the thought right off the bat. So you can understand their problem easily. So that really helped me in my role to understand that where they're coming from and how to teach them to overcome what their thought process is and what their interpretation is. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the examples that I actually have is when in school, I actually have like random study mates. They study different things, and I'm just naturally curious, so I actually study off their topic too. So one of them is electrical, so I know how to read a little bit of a electrical diagram. And one time, one of my client wanted to install X amount of CTUs in one space, and I was on the existing space that already have many things going on. So I pull out their electrical diagram. I was like, it's gonna overkill. It's not gonna work. And then they were like, oh, I did not know that. They took that to their electrical engineer, and I was like, yes, that was correct. But if I didn't look at it and I just went ahead and be like, oh yeah, go ahead and do it, it would have fried it.
Sounds like you have to know what you don't know, and no one asks for help or try to get other parties involved.
Yeah, exactly. Know what you don't know. That's right. So are there things that you all learned that you had to unlearn, or are those anything like, out of university, early career, like, are there things that you've like that you thought you were going to need to know and you kind of had to like say, nope, we're going to put that away and like unlearn it? Or is it been a little bit more or an organic process? Any thoughts about that?
For me, excuse me, for me, it was a major shift from, pouring over, PNIDs, heat exchangers, stuff like that, and then looking more at the software thing. I had to kind of reconstruct how I look at things, because I was able to, visually, or imagine rather, these pieces of equipment, these situations that were put in front of me, in like problems in college. And now, since everything is kind of digital within the software, it's not quite it wasn't as easy to visualize in my head, how things are going from point A to point B and what's happening to them, burrowing through software to try to get into another system on the network. How is that working per se? It was that took some getting used to, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Madre, did you have a thought?
Yeah, for me, I was like, whatever I learned in my bachelor's and master's, that helped me really, really good to transform into the role where I am, to understand. I had really good fundamentation and really good fundamentals that I had in my electrical and computer engineering background, and in electronics when I did my bachelor's. So everywhere I learned something, but when I transformed into a role, I thought I could have learned more on one particular topic. Um, then no, I could have learned it beforehand than now. So I was like, when I was transforming, every single bit of my education helped me a lot. So because being in the same or similar field, that helped me move to different positions really quick,
Right.
and to understand the process really really quick.
So it sounds like you had a lot of the basic fundamentals, and that gave you a good baseline in order to get to where you were going. One of the things I've heard, kind of common theme for all four of you, and I want to check to see if this is true, you all sound like instinctual problem solvers, liking puzzles. Oh, look at all those shaking heads. Yeah.
I do a crossword most mornings. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting too. So I'm very similar. So it's having to do something different every day. I think Benny, you were saying that, right? Like every day is something different, something new. You have to apply it in a different way. And you guys are all shaking your head. So that's exciting to me. Is it exciting to you? Like that's kind of the role that you're sitting in now, given it's something important.
I do think so. I do think so because, like I mentioned back in the lab days, I repeat every single like step continuously every day. It's very, very dry. And I feel like, yes, there are times where like, it's very sad to say, but my most exciting time was when the equipment breaks down. But that's also when I can't meet my KPI or my turnaround time. So, but I get to learn, I get to do diagnostic, I get to try to fix certain things. If not, I call the vendor in, I work with them, and I learn something new. And the next thing you know, like machine is running smooth. So that's my favorite time, but it's also the boss's worst times.
Right. Sam, were you going to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's something that ties into that too. It's not just problem solving, but learning how the problem or the puzzle is built and teaching it to other people. So I feel like validation really exists at a nexus point in a lot of organizations where we're the go-between for QA and vendors, project managers, business system owners, IT, and we're tasked with putting that puzzle together for everybody and showing them how you built it and how you solve that problem and making sure that there's consensus and everyone agrees on it. And I feel like it's a really unique and challenging part of the role, that it's not just, solving the puzzle, but getting that affirmation that everybody agrees that that's how the puzzle should be solved.
I like it.
Yeah, and to kind of back off on that. So Dory, you mentioned what is something that I need to unlearn or relearn or any of that. So I feel like that's everyday thing. So because every situation is different, every company handles certain things differently, and even within the company, like I mentioned, every situation is different. So there are times where just because you normally apply steps one, like a continuous step like A, B, C, D doesn't always work. Sometimes you need like a D.1 or a D.2. And then I feel like just the concept in general. So every single day, the industry is advancing, technology is advancing, especially technology. Last couple of days or last month, someone asked me to do something on Facebook. I was like, I don't know how to do it. And they call me a grandma. It changed way too fast for me to learn. So I have to learn. It's not just in the pharma industry. It's the approach, the idea, technology, the way we do things. We are constantly having to unlearn and relearn in order to catch up.
So that's great, Benny, and that helps us also transition to the second topic that we want to talk about today, because I think what you're highlighting is so key, right? So one of the things I wanted to talk with you guys about was, pharma life sciences is changing rapidly, right? We have some of the most advanced innovation in terms of drug technology, medical device software as a medical device, all coming out lots. And while not all one company has major initiatives across the board, many of these companies have initiatives going on in order to really advance some of the stuff that they're doing. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing? What excites you about that? And also, what does that mean? I think, and Benny, I think you've touched on it a little bit, to this world of validation and quality. So what are some of your thoughts about this? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Sure.
Okay. Some of the technologies that excites me currently is AI and ML and big data and VR. That's going to be big in next I would say 5 to 10 years. Those will play really big role in manufacturing companies or in pharma companies. So why I said that, like a long time back there was not much of a automation that's going on in the companies. So now a lot of automation came in and automation took over everything. So that's the same thing that's going to happen with AI and ML. And there are some small things that we can use AI and just feed all the real-time data into it, and then it process it and it does for us. It's like an automation, but it it uses its artificial intelligence brain to process everything and gives the output to us. So as a matter of fact, one of the company that I know, that they're building some custom solutions for their audit trail review. So they sit with manufacturers and reviews their audit trails, and reviews their audit trail process of reviewing, and reviews their SOPs, and uh, reviews manually and understands their needs and builds their review automatically by using AI and ML. They feed their historical data, and they feed their statistical data, how they did in the past and how they wanted to do it, and how we can defend it by submitting this to the FDA. So that's one thing that where I learned. And even some companies approached me and explained how they can build bots to the SOPs and the processes in the company. So where you can give a question to a bot, and it explains like Alexa. So you ask
Yep.
something and it gives an answer. So something like that.
Yep.
So you ask a question to the bot, and it's an artificial intelligence, and it learns all your procedures and processes inside the company. You feed in all those into that, and it gives you output.
Yeah. So one of the things, so what I'm hearing you're saying, Hamidri, which makes sense, and I think it's a very low risk kind of use of AI, right? Is kind of doing an automation of some I'm going to call them menial tasks that quality folk or validation folk do on a regular basis, and how can we automate some of that stuff so that we can actually get to higher level processing brain work, right? And take some of that stuff. So I have seen that as well. So that's interesting. What also other thoughts? Because I have some other thoughts, but Skylar, did you want to?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really interested in it and excited about, AR or VR. This was kind of presented on quite a bit at the conference that we met in Philly at Dory.
Yeah.
The concept of creating a digital twin and being able to, slap on like a headset or something and walking through a space and things like that, seeing the equipment. I think that's really going to help dramatically for training, for trying to figure out maintenance, getting operators experience before they're actually there. And it would be a major step up from the traditional training of read the SOP. Because I mean, we all know that that's just not really an effective way to train people. So if you can have this, safe virtual environment where nothing's going to break, they're not going to hurt themselves, anything like that, they can see where everything's going to be laid out, test running samples and things like that. And I think it's really going to speed up how quickly we can get operators trained for new spaces and being able to adapt when you get new equipment in and stuff like that.
I agree with it totally, and I've seen it implemented in a company that I've worked for, and they use AR and VR technology for manufacturing training, like whoever works in manufacturing floor, so they don't have to go to the manufacturing floor to understand. We have this AR and VR built. They get a VR glasses, and they put on, and they see like how in reality it happens in the virtual reality. And that's aseptic training in manufacturing that's already in place, and I have seen it. I've actually I was so curious, and I went and asked, and they just I didn't need I don't need that training, but I just
you wanted
was
to
excited.
put on the you want to put on. Yeah. So I mean, again, this is another example of getting to some reproducibility in an automated way and making things more effective. It also is an example of also optimizing business processes much more effectively, right? And so, and I know we're all familiar with the SOPs, right? How many SOPs, and some companies make you read and understand like 80 SOPs, which you might not never need, right? But this actually realigns that to what is the most essential things someone must be able to perform with excellence, right? Because you're not going to make a whole bunch of VR videos for everything, because that would cost a fortune, right? So it kind of is forcing folks to think more critically about what are the key tasks, what are the essential tasks that need to happen, and how can we make those as most reproducible as possible. Great examples. Sam, Benny?
Yeah, so my idea here centers around using the distributed ledger for your audit trails. So you might know it as like blockchain or crypto. And I think I rolled my eyes the first time I heard somebody say, "Are we going to make a crypto coin for our company?" But I thought about it a little bit more, and having your data, your audit trail, tied to a hash in the cloud that you can't, revoke or
Can't
change.
change, yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful. It changes that like trust that the FDA places in you and the trust that you place in your system administrators. It really makes it concrete.
And another example of you actually need to know your business process.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when, even with all of the companies that I work with and I'm seeing, not many actually invest in doing data process mapping. What is this true, supply chain and all the functions that go into their supply chain of a particular thing? But that is a great example. Blockchain is a great example. You absolutely have to know what it is.
Yeah. Everything that goes in, everything that comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Benny.
Yeah. So one thing I'm excited about, well, I'm excited about everything that you guys all just mentioned, but what I'm also excited about is how these tools will affect, well, not affect, but change the way we are thinking. Because a lot of the problems that I get into is we have now CSA, and some people are reluctant to use CSA because they don't exactly know. There's this old saying that if it's not broken, don't change it. Well, that's true, but that's also how you don't improve things. So the process, stage 3, continuous improvement, that's part of what we should be doing. But if we are stuck in the old mindset of let's do paper-based, let's not do AI ML because it's too much risk, we don't exactly know what's going on, especially the ML portion, we're never going to advance. And how can we continuously improve? So by having these coming out to the market and become part of our lives, it kind of forced us to think differently, our mentalities wire differently, and therefore how we validate these and how much trust we are building to this. So kind of more like a forward thinking.
Yeah. So from a data maturity model perspective, right, we've shifted yet again. And so some of those maturity models that I had for 3 years ago have to be completely trashed because we have shifted yet again. And so one has to think of, where are you at on that maturity model curve, right? Like, have you actually started a process or some pilot projects or whatever, starting to do some of this stuff? And if you haven't, you're kind of behind, right? Yep. And you guys are all shaking your head. So also what I hear in what you're saying, because you're all very excited about a lot of these different things, all of these things that we were just talking about, take off those mindless, burdensome tasks off your day-to-day plate so you can get to some more really better, deeper, critical thinking stuff, right?
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Critical thinking is the big part. Yeah.
Yeah. So with some of the, the innovators and drug companies and medical device companies out there, we are also experiencing more combined product solutions where we have drug product laced in with the software medical device that's laced into a medical device that's delivering in a personalized medicine sort of way, right? So all of these different kind of streams, which were normally or traditionally done kind of in silos, right? You had your drug companies and you had your medical device companies, you had this, they're all like converging together to make some cool stuff. What do you guys think about that? And how does that kind of influence the CSV space and quality as we move forward here? Because again, in those individuals, they were different quality heads for each of those groups, right? You guys have any thoughts about that?
So I don't have much of any experience with, companies or processes like that. But my initial reaction is that would be a very large improvement to the kind of having the separate heads and these separate departments. Because I mean, just in my, condensed amount of experience, right? 3 or 4 approvers on each document, need to get input from 3 or 4 different people, have to get it all together. We need to make sure that the input that they're giving doesn't conflict with each other. So if everything is in one process with one company, streamlined like that, I think that's really going to improve the speed at which we can get, these products to the patient. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, speed to patient, getting this medicine, these devices, whatever, to help make people better.
So the startup that I was at was one of the organizations that I would say that was or pursued the most technologically advanced solutions that I had seen in the space. And I still feel like we had a lot of back and forth and misunderstandings with software teams, actual software development teams, and their QA teams as well. And I think really the solution to improving processes there is shift validation more towards using the tools, the processes, the jargon that software development uses rather than trying to teach them compliance.
Right. So in an agile way. So you mentioned that earlier, Sam, and that's something that I've been trying to help and coach as well around, and really consolidating that review cycle, right? So that it doesn't have to be a separate activity. That's one thing that, that's easier said than done, right? To do. And so what is some of your thoughts around that? Because an agile team is a software development kind of thing, right? What do we need to do in order to get it a little bit more user-friendly for our validation quality folks?
I think we need a lot more training from our non-software development team. So someone like Hamadri being in QA is the right step forward. Somebody who's lived that life and can walk the walk and talk the talk. Having to slow down every time to talk to QA about, what automated testing looks like, or, what a container is, or this virtualization layer or anything like that. Like, it slows us down a lot. And I know we can teach compliance to software developers, but they're not the most eager participants. No offense to anyone, but they just want to write their code, but we can make it work for everyone if I think everyone comes to sit at the same table.
Again, I totally agree with Sam, whatever he said, because I was in that situation where I had to train a lot of compliance, a lot of regulatory regulations, because like a lot of software developers and the business administrators that I work with are not so much experienced in regulatory environment. They straight came from agile environment, from IT companies, and it's hard for them to adapt to these regulations, and they always wanted to teach their way and question, like, why can't we do this? Why do we have to follow this? And that's one of my challenge that I've faced, and I've had a lot of trainings, and end to end, even after the trainings, I get questions from the folks like, why do we need to do that? And I give them rationals, and I give them like a live examples with what's expected, and what's the regulation. And in I sometimes teach them in layman terms, like I break them into small terms one by one and teach them like how it is applied to regulations and what's needed according to regulation, and why it is not accepted the way that they do in agile environment.
So I would challenge you a little bit here, and why I raise this is because the software development life cycle, and if you do it properly, right, actually produces quality outputs. And so when we start mixing this regulation versus process sort of conversation, I think we add a bunch of terminology onto something that is already actually a really good process if adhered to, right? So, but again, because I can say this because I'm a quality person, we like our terminology, right? And so we want folks to really understand that stuff. But what I actually, my experience is giving up that terminology in service of, is it working or is it not working? Right? So if a software release is working reproducibly each and every time, do we really need to add an extra layer of some sort of testing on top of it or some other level of documentation when it actually, the output is sufficient quality,
No,
right?
yeah, you don't have to add anything, but if you just prove that it is working, even after your configuration lock, like let's say your SDLC lifecycle, in your SDLC lifecycle, they have done this in your development environment, and after release, like after configuration lock, it's working as is,
Mhm.
then you don't have to prove or do an extra layer of work.
Right.
You just
But
say that, yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
so but this is the hard part for a lot of folks, right?
Mhm.
Is because they're wanting to do this extra thing or this other layer or call it something different. See it every day, and it's really kind of like getting back to some of the basics, like you were saying, Sam, right? Like the agile SDLC is a kind of tried and true when done. And there are, of course, there's the diehards, right, that absolutely have to have in their agile mindset, right, in that sort of specific way. But it doesn't mean it can't be tweaked or modified. Benny, I see you nodding your head a lot.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing to what everyone is saying. And personally, I've actually had a similar experience where um, I am facilitating a CSV PMD, and I'm trying to adjust it to the CSA style or CSA approach. But I've had some terminology conflicts and also mindset conflicts because there's the excessive documentation for like a category 5. And I feel like just because it's and there's a misconception out there that CSA can only be used for category 3s and 4s, which is not true. Personally, I think that, well, it is that a lot of people think it is true, but to me, it's like, no, it's an approach. It's a critical thinking approach. It's a risk-based critical thinking approach. You can apply it to anything as long as you can reason it correctly.
That's absolutely
reason.
right. Yeah. The draft guidance says nothing about any GAMP categories. Okay, so
exactly.
GAMP is completely different from the FDA.
Yeah,
but we conflate them. We like to make them the same thing, but they're not.
Exactly. So if you, like, all 5 of us go into one same class, we each walk out with completely different like ideas and thoughts, because we can't really control what we think, because everything that we input and how we process is very objective. And that's where I'm very excited where AI ML comes in, because we give it exactly what we've configured it to exactly how it processes things and what to process and what kind of information to take out from there. And then from that AI, then eventually ML subsides from of AI and data science. Yeah. And from there, it learns all these information, sorts all these information. And the way that it thinks, the way that it analyzes these data is not subjective by person anymore, but it's actually data backing up.
Yeah. So actually what you're saying is very exciting, because we can take that subjectivity out of the validation space if we optimize some of the AI and machine learning utilities that are being thought about and processed. Yeah. So we're going to start wrapping up here in a few, but I want to start shifting our focus here a little bit towards what kind of lessons learned that you've now, because you've gotten your feet wet in your careers, you're on your journey. What are some of the thoughts that you have for some folks, young folks that are just entering maybe college or looking to start getting into the workforce? And then on the flip side of that, we'll kind of talk about what advice or what would you like someone like myself who is a Generation X, what would you like us to, how would you like to challenge us in our way of thinking, or what are the things that we need to do differently? What are some of the challenges you might have that here's kind of an open forum that you can kind of share with, I wish you guys would do X or Y. So I'm going to leave it with that. And who wants to start?
Um, I can start off a little bit
All right.
with your generation,
Mhm.
meaning that no offense to your generation,
No offense to my
and it's
generation
not
whatsoever.
against to you. It's not against
Go
them.
for it.
Yeah. So as I've learned everything from your generation, and a lot of people from your generation are adapting to the new technologies, and the way that's transforming in the present generation is really awesome. But I've seen the other way. Some of the folks that they really want to stick to the old thinking, and they don't. They say, yeah, we are up to the change, but when they wanted to change, but there's a lot of resistance that's going on, that they don't want to change, and they want to stick on to the old thinking, and they come up with this statement. I think you might have heard this a million times. We have done it in the past, and why can't we do it right now?
Mm-hmm.
And not adapting to the current thinking. And we need them to start adapt to the present or new technologies and new generation and new current thinking. So that's my big ask. And no offense, like I've seen a lot of folks are, yeah, they are adapting, but I've seen there is some resistance that's going on. So we have to advance when the technology is advancing.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot follow the same regulation or same guidance that's out there from 1990 or 1998. So there's a lot out there that's been changing, and that was written for that generation, that period of time,
Right.
not
Right. And
now.
that technology of the time, right? And
That
so
technology of
now
the time.
that technology has changed. And so you have to. All right.
You
So
have to. So
absolutely.
that's my big ask.
Mhm.
And yeah, for the young folks who wanted to get into the workforce, I mean, to get into the validation realm or any kind of engineering realm. So I would always say that grab whatever gets to their way and figure out what you wanted to do by learning, or by doing what you have right now, and learn that what you have right now, and figure out, like, if you have a big clarity about what you wanted to do, grab that opportunity. Or if you don't have any clarity, so grab that what you have in front of you and take it and work on it. And when you're working on it, you'll find some mentors, or you'll find someone who can motivate you to come into another field. Maybe there you get motivated by that person and get into that realm. So I would say grab the opportunity and just work on it. Everything that you work in your part of journey, that'll help you in some way. That's what I've learned. I worked on every single um, part of the validation or like engineering. So I learned a lot that helped me in my journey. So that's my 2 cents, or
Yeah,
my
it's awesome.
my take on it.
Who's next?
Maybe I'll go next. So kind of, it's not really about your generation. I've had people my age or newer than me coming into industry, and because they have a mentor that thinks certain way, and they learn from certain way, and they stuck with that certain way and start arguing.
That's interesting. Gotcha.
So the thing about it is not your age, it's not about your experience, it's not it is about experience, and it's about practice, it's about everything that you've learned, but then it's also about how you apply it, how you process those experience. Just because you've gone into a major project, just because you've been in a major big tech company, whatever it is, does not mean it's right, it's wrong, or it's whatever. Just like Himadri said, the regulations like Part 11, was what,
1997.
1997.
And it was not looked at it, or the most recent time that I got looked at was 2010. I mean, 2010, we are still using slide phones. Like, how often do you see that nowadays?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Internet, if I remember correctly, internet was not really coming into us until like 2014, where
High
phones
speed.
actually
Yeah.
have like
Right.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Like, look at us now. We don't have Wi-Fi. We can't exist. So there's like, I don't even know how to get to work with Wi-Fi without Wi-Fi. So it changed drastically.
Yeah.
So your mindset, critical thinking is a great word. Whatever you learn, whatever you experience, don't just stick at that phase. Think about it, process it, analyze it, pick out what's good, pick out whatever that might not work, make it into a lesson learned. If none of that is useful, it's a good story to tell.
Awesome. I like it, Benny. Sam?
Yeah, so my advice for the younger generations, I think, is very similar to Hamadri's, and it's that you need to study theory, but you really need to spend more time with practical examples and have that hands-on time. Push yourself out of your comfort zone, seek work that isn't necessarily yours, just to learn outside of your boundaries, and just always be looking for somebody to teach you something new. And I think that's how they can succeed in their careers outside of, after school is done. And then when it comes to advice for, an older generation, or just quality partners in general, is that open-mindedness to open source is something that needs to be embraced. So I've stood up in a meeting and talked about using open source tools for CSV processes, and just gotten rotten tomatoes thrown at me.
I can imagine.
Hates to hear it, but if it's good enough for our vendors to use, and we use their software, I think we can build our own tools on it. We have
a lot of data science around that.
Yeah, we can put practices in place to lock versions and control source, and test that beyond the limits that it's already tested to. We just need open minds to it. And I think on top of that, utilizing like existing open source software tools out there, it would be great to develop like an open source knowledge base for CSV. Something that I'd love to talk to some people on the call about. Okay, and it's probably divergent.
That's a good topic.
Ideas.
Yeah.
I can feel you, Sam.
But every time in my journey, when I was trying to learn something new, I always just wished that there was one place to go and get industry expertise around that was free and accessible, that everyone could contribute to, and we could moderate it forum style.
Yeah.
That's
so my key phrase is quality is not proprietary.
Exactly.
It's not. And so this is a great lots of conversation, and maybe we'll have some follow-up stuff. That sounds very exciting, Sam. Skylar.
Yes. So for the younger people just getting in, which I feel kind of funny saying that because I'm very much in that boat. But definitely what I've felt has helped me a lot was just to, be a sponge. Every single time, just try to learn something and try to solicit opinions and, get information from various different parties. And when somebody does teach you something a certain way or tell you to do it a certain way, perhaps take it with a grain of salt, because there are maybe other ways to do it. When I first started out, there was a contractor from another company that I was working with and trying, to get me I should interact with, quality in certain ways and things like that. And then I started seeing other people work with quality in different ways, I was like, oh, maybe that's a little bit of a better way, just because somebody's teaching you something, it's at the very least a good stepping stone, and it's once you start getting information from multiple parties, you can really sort of get a really good picture of how best to operate, I think.
So it's kind of like crowdsourcing.
Exactly. That's 100% it. Yeah. And then as far as for advice for the older generation, or what I would like to see, a lot of the mindset I see is very regulatory, FDA focused, compliance focused, which is, great. Obviously, you want everything to be compliant. But I mentioned this earlier, at the end of the day, we're helping create products that are intended to help people get healthier. Compliance should just be a byproduct of good business practice. And your good business practice is going to be creating, a sound device, a proper medication, vaccine, whatever, that when it gets to the patient, it's going to help them get better. So through that, compliance should just come naturally. It's going to make sure there's no holes in the data, where somebody could somehow delete something, or somebody can pretend that they ran a sample that they didn't.
Yeah.
That should all just come naturally.
Yep.
And that's I've been in so many conversations where some more experienced colleagues of mine have said, if I were an auditor and I looked at this, I'm like, maybe that's not the best way to think.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I really like what you were saying. So yeah, quality by design, kind of in first principles, if building it as you go, you don't necessarily need to add on stuff if you're doing all those things from the very, very beginning. One of the things, all of what you're saying, I really take to heart is having an open mindset, right? I think we've all kind of shared, I think all of you have said it in one form or fashion on the call today, right? And coming to the table with that open mindset to actually have a dialogue, to actually learn from one another, to, figure out what each other is saying, such that we can move forward towards something new. And create something new, because that is ultimately what I think we're trying to do here, right? Is we're trying to move forward an industry. We're trying to move forward business processes. We're trying to move forward how we collectively think. And a lot of the ideas that you guys have raised today are very, very interesting. I think that they're going to be accelerated in earnest. In some form or fashion, particularly in the quality realm, and how to make some of these business processes more automated. I do see that as a big trend. And at the end of the day, we also have to convince why it's still important to do those tasks, right? Because we're not going to get investment dollars if no one's going to buy it. Right? They're great ideas, but where's the added value in that? And what I'm heard from our conversation today is some of the added value is because we want to get to better things. We want to get to some more complicated tasks. We want to get to some more creative ways of innovating across the board. So let's nip in the bud and let's get some of those things that we all do day to day off our table, so we can do some more exciting stuff. We're going to close out. This has been a wonderful, wonderful first in our series. I think we're going to come back and do this several different types and maybe different iterations between webinars and other things, and be happy to take folks' questions live.